Evening, everybody. Paul Swinney, CEO of Tristel, and we are an infection prevention company. So everything that we do is intended to eliminate the presence of harmful microbes in hospitals where they might be found on medical devices or on surfaces to protect patients and staff from the risk of acquiring infection whilst in hospital. Exclusive focus upon the hospital and an exclusive focus, almost an exclusive focus on a proprietary chemistry, which is called chlorine dioxide, which we are unique in using for these purposes of disinfection in hospitals around the world. With respect to medical device disinfection, which accounts at the moment for about 90% of our revenues, we use the chlorine dioxide, and it qualifies as what is defined by the CDC, the FDA, regulators here in Europe, microbiologists, as a high-level disinfectant. And the types of devices that are for which our products are applicable as a high-level disinfectant would be used in diagnosis. So ultrasound probes that are used in invasive procedures, intracavity probes that are used rectally or vaginally. In ophthalmology, tonometers are used and come into contact with the cornea, so they require high-level disinfection, and so on throughout the body. There are multiple use sites for diagnostic instruments on the body, and they all require HLD or high-level disinfection, and chlorine dioxide is a very powerful biocide, is perfect for this purpose. So we have three exceptional standout features of our products. We're the only company in the world that applies chlorine dioxide as a high-level disinfectant, and we do it manually. So we were not involved with machines. The analogy might be your dishwasher at home. It's a machine that cleans, in this case, your kitchenware. In the hospital, there are equivalent machines that are used to disinfect medical instruments, but we enable the nurse to do this manually using the hands. And we also combine plenty of ingenuity in the way in which we can enable hospitals to track and trace what they have done. With respect to surfaces, disinfectants are used ubiquitously in hospitals, as you could well imagine. But again, we're unique in bringing chlorine dioxide with the high performance that enables it to be used on medical devices to surfaces that we will find in and around the patient. So within a ward, within an operating theatre, we're talking about the mattress, the equipment that surrounds the patient. These are the high-risk areas for hospital-acquired infection, and chlorine dioxide is probably the best disinfectant known for the elimination of such microbes. We've been a public company on the AIM market since 2005. Over the course of that 16-year period, our compound annual growth rate has been over 15%. We've had 2 years in which there's been a setback in that sales growth story, and the year that ended on the 30th of June last year was the second of those. COVID has impacted us because diagnostic procedures in hospitals all around the world have been reduced, enabling hospitals' resources to be diverted to COVID. We are now coming out of this period. We can see demand in hospitals in all the countries in which we operate starting to revive. We're all very familiar with the backlog of patients that are waiting to be scoped or to have an ultrasound scan or to have some kind of treatment, and that underpins the recovery of our growth story as we look to future years. Geographical expansion has been a major driver of our sales growth and the development of the business. We have this year, which will end in a month and a half, over 65% of our revenues will derive from countries outside of the United Kingdom. We have 13 subsidiaries, which are essentially sales organizations addressing the hospitals directly with our own sales teams, and they're colored in purple throughout Western Europe and Central Europe, Hong Kong and China, Australasia, and two subsidiaries in Southeast Asia. We are also represented in the Nordics and elsewhere by distributors. These are medical products distributors that we've nurtured over the years. And we have subsidiaries in Japan, India, and the United States. I'm going to come on to the United States next. For a fairly long period of time, it's interesting to follow diurnal. It's a different kind of interaction that we have with regulators. All of our products are CE marked as medical devices in Europe. In the United States, we encounter the FDA. For the past 4 years, we've been working on a submission to the FDA to gain high-level disinfection approval, and then we will be able to replicate, mimic what we've done in other countries in the United States. The opportunity is greater in value terms. The only gatekeeper to unlocking that opportunity is the FDA. By the end of June, if the team does what the team has promised to do, and we've promised our shareholders, we will have made a submission to the FDA. It's a de novo submission, and we would expect an approval to be received by us within the course of the next 12 months. We have another registration that's running in parallel for which we have approval, which is the use of the chemistry at a slightly lower pitch, slightly lower in terms of price point and efficacy claims, and we're getting state-by-state registrations for Duo from the EPA at the moment. And in Canada, we're about to go to market with a version of our Duo product, which is one of our lead products, where the indication for use is on ophthalmic instruments. I managed to get out the word tonometer earlier, and that's the instrument set that it will be used on by Canadian hospitals. We've operated for the past 8, 9, well, we're in the 9th year now with 3 consecutive financial targets, very simple ones that we make known to our shareholders and prospective shareholders. We'll be renewing these. I hope that we'll be able to do that when we have a shareholder open day on the 18th of July. Without making any firm commitments, I anticipate that we'll roll over the targets that we've operated to for the past nearly 9 years, which is 10 to 15% top line growth, EBITDA margin of at least 25%. We have fallen short this year. We did fall short last year. I think we will have returned to top-line growth this current financial year when we take account of the discontinuation of some activities that we're involved in that were peripheral to the hospital and were not involving chlorine dioxide. We had an small involvement in the veterinary marketplace and sterile manufacturing by pharma companies, and we brought that all to a halt during the first half, took some quick and decisive decisions to get out of anything that wasn't hospital-based and chlorine dioxide-based. That's our past history, and as I say, I want to emphasize, I think we're returning to that growth trajectory, and this talk walks you through the pandemic. And you can see the 3 waves, sales recovering, and then we took a left turn with COVID. Sales recovering, we took another left turn with COVID. And I hope, as we all do here in this room, that we're leaving COVID behind us. Our sales teams can get back into hospitals. Hospitals are returning to the levels of service that we would have known before COVID struck. And every time a patient, whichever country they're in, goes and has an ultrasound scan, the instrument has to be disinfected. And that's our revenue opportunity, our revenue click. So we need patients to be returning to hospitals and hospitals to be returning to the levels of service that were familiar to us before COVID, and that growth trajectory will continue upward. Thank you. Q&A. I should have said at the beginning, we do have to leave, so we won't be able to mingle with you afterwards. So that's why I've cantered through this, so that we can take this opportunity to get to questions.
Can I go to questions in the room then? So a question just here.
So what are the barriers from another company coming along and replacing your product?
Well, they're quite substantial and they've built over time. At the core of it, our chlorine dioxide chemistry, which is ostensibly a very simple reaction. We react sodium chloride with a safe acid. We use citric acid. Very simple chemistry. But to get the reaction to take place as quickly as we enable it to, and to do it a neutral pH, there's some clever chemistry that's embedded in the formulation. That goes right back to the beginnings of the company. The chemist who developed that technology is still with us, and so there's proprietary know-how that we would regard as trade secret. As we've succeeded in the marketplace, then as we've been through a very extensive and wide-ranging product development process, continuous one over many years, we've created a great many patents. I think we have 250 granted patents around the world. A lot of them revolve around the delivery methods that we've created, not just the chemistry itself. So there's IP in that traditional sense. And as we become more and more widely used and accepted by hospitals, then testimony has built. And it becomes evidence that ultimately in published science, we don't sponsor it, we don't create it, but academics or clinicians will perform a study, compare us to alternatives, look at efficacy, and you get this building body of published science, which is specific to us because we're unique with respect to chlorine dioxide. There aren't other chlorine dioxide companies. Very importantly for us, we get written into guidelines. So, for example, in 2004, which was a real inflection point for us in the United Kingdom with our manual wiping process, which we call TRIO, the UK's group of ENT surgeons were desperately looking around for a manual, fast, safe method of disinfecting the endoscopes they use, because the government at the time, if you might recall this, were trying to get hospitals to send all of their instrumentation for decontamination to super centres. Well, an ENT doctor will see 20 patients a day easily. The procedure of putting a nasendoscope into the nose and down to the vocal cords takes a minute. For him or her to have to send their nasendoscope away to a neighbouring large town by truck would mean one thing. We'd have to buy lots of nasendoscopes and they're expensive. So we were very fortunate, we were at the right place, right time, and we were the ideal answer to the ENT group of ENT surgeons to embrace us, to write us into their guidelines. They only change them every decade or more. And by being written into the guidelines, cells just rocketed in the United Kingdom because we're the answer to their prayers. And that's happened in ultrasound, it's happened in ophthalmic, it's happened in all sorts of different clinical areas. If you follow the schematic of the body, that's our sales map in many respects around the hospital. And the last sort of layer, the ring of a moat of defences that we have in place, is that we come into contact with medical devices. And if those medical devices were to be damaged by our products, then they wouldn't be used. And the medical device manufacturers themselves have to inform their users that there is a disinfectant that can be used safely without damaging them. So it's a sort of a symbiotic relationship where GE needs to have a high-level disinfectant for its ultrasound probes. We do a lot of work with GE and Siemens and Toshiba and others to prove that out by doing testing with them on their instrumentation. And then we get written into their care cards. So when GE is trying to sell an ultrasound system, it effectively might help us by promoting, or not possibly promoting, but suggesting that TRIO could be used. Put all of this together, plus, to go back to something maybe I omitted, you can't store chlorine dioxide. As the reaction I spoke of requires a compound held in one bottle or one receptacle and a compound held in another. And the trick, really, what we've done is to manage to enable users to bring them together at the same time without preparation, without measuring or dosing. The disinfectant industry isn't the most imaginative one. And selling bleach, where you have a 5-litre container and you pour a cup out and add water to it, is about the extent of a lot of people's imagination, I would say. I'm being a bit rude here to competitors, but it does require some ingenuity to do what we've done. I do think that's one of the reasons why we have mastered chlorine dioxide and others have avoided it.
Excellent. Any more questions in the room? Another one just along the way.
Hi there. I was wondering what kind of staff numbers you have, whether you're holding on to your experienced ones and whether staff turnover is an issue for you.
We've
And
today.
secondly, have you had any approaches from the companies like GE who would be potential takeover options?
With respect to the first question, we've got 200 staff around the world, 120 here in the UK. We do our manufacturing in a small village just outside of Newmarket in Suffolk. It's very easy, simple manufacturing. And we've got 80 people around those 13 subsidiaries overseas, and they're principally salespeople. So I think we've been very successful over the years in retaining people. We've recruited a lot of young people. We've nurtured them. I think I would say so, but I think it's a nice company to work for, and it's an interesting business that we're in. So we've nurtured a lot of talent and retained that talent over the years that we've been in business. And I have to say that we went public in 2005, but there was another 12 years before that when there was myself and a couple of others, the wilderness years, when we really were trying to find a way in which we could perfect the technology and understand our marketplace. With respect to interest from other companies, our greatest protection has been our valuation. The share price is today, I think it's 330p. It has been 650p at its height, which was in the summer of 2021. Very high multiples, and I think that is a reason, probably the reason why whilst we might look attractive in terms of our competitive position and our technology, I think the valuation has been our protection against any approaches thus far.
Thank you. Any more questions in the room? I just had a quick question,
Yeah.
or a couple. So one was just on the manufacturing capacity and like your ability to sort of flex that up as demand comes back. Is that something that you'll be able to do sort of relatively
Yes,
easily?
we will. It is a simple process of sachet and bottle filling. It's low tech. It's still very manual. We've got something like 30 out of our 120 people in the UK that are dedicated to the production process. I think it's very scalable, and I hope that demand materialises so that it challenges that statement, but I believe it is.
Yeah, nice problem to have, I suppose. And then in terms of distribution as well, how does that work?
Well, a large part of our success has been telling our own story as the unique use of chlorine dioxide to hospitals. Our audience in a hospital is the infection prevention team and to clinicians. It's a difficult story to tell, and we do it best when we do it ourselves. So of the 80 people that work outside of the country, and actually a reasonably large sales force in the UK, out of the whole 200 odd employees that we have, 65 of them are frontline salespeople. So we sell directly, we deliver directly to hospitals, and then we have the peculiarity of in the United Kingdom where much of this type of product is delivered to hospitals or distributed around hospitals by the National Health Service supply chain. So they become a buying hub for all of the trusts around the country.
Excellent. And just a question on margins. I noticed before sort of the last financial year before COVID, margins were at 30%, obviously a little bit above that 25% target. Is that a sort of sustainable level for the business going forward?
At the EBITDA PBT level, yes, I do believe
Right.
it is. Yeah. So our gross margin runs at around 80%. I think we're edging up by, in the first half, discontinuing a lot of lower margin products that were absorbing a disproportionate amount of management time and production effort. I think we might push that gross margin up as we look out to next year. But it flows through sort of 25 to 30 cents on the dollar to the bottom line.
Sure. Okay. Question at the back.
Yeah, thanks, Paul, for the presentation. Just wanted to ask, you mentioned about hospitals and about wanting to see more patients going into hospitals because that's your business.
Yeah.
But when you watch the TV and listen to the radio, hospitals are stretched.
Yeah.
I was just wondering how you could explain that a bit more for us. Thank you.
Well, I'll just we're involved in diagnostics rather than surgical. So people waiting for hips and the like, that we don't involve ourselves in that. But anybody that's wanting to have an ultrasound scan or an endoscopy, that is where we are involved. The biggest problem with hospitals at the moment, during COVID, it was the diversion of resources to COVID wards, compounded by PPE requirements, which meant that fewer people could attend a hospital, and the throughput of patients in an outpatients area was reduced because you had seating. You could only have 10 chairs in a waiting room rather than the 20 chairs to wait to accommodate patients before COVID. A lot of that's being alleviated, and you'll have read that people are saying that the PPE requirement should be relaxed because of the impact it's having on service levels. The biggest problem at the moment, I think, here in the UK, and it's true in all countries, is staff shortages. Yep. We all hope that those issues will be alleviated as time.
But that will take time, won't it? Obviously,
it will do.
Training people to work in hospitals.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, it is a real problem in the UK for hospitals, and we know that at first hand. Our chairman is the CEO of Oxford University NHS Trust, so we have a direct line into the problems that the trusts are experiencing, recruiting more staff, training more staff, and bringing people back to work from sickness. It's a political issue as well, isn't it? It is here in this country and it is elsewhere in the world. And of course in Shanghai, where we have a good business, is about a £600,000-700,000 revenue stream, which is quite meaningful for us. We've not been able to ship a product for about 6 weeks because the warehouse is closed and all of our staff are in their apartment blocks and they're locked into their apartments as well, which is quite a remarkable situation.
So in percentage terms, in terms of recurring revenue, what does that account for on your margins?
In what, sorry?
So obviously you must produce and generate recurring revenue from the products that you sell into the hospitals.
99% of all of our revenues are of a consumable. So every time a dollop of foam is expressed from one of our pump dispensers and onto a nasendoscope, that's a revenue hit for us. And every time a patient is scoped, that causes the decontamination, that is the reason for the decontamination event. So all of our revenues are of a consumable, and the consumable is an essential. And if there is an investment thesis right now for our company, it is the world returning to post-COVID, or not the world, hospitals returning to post-COVID levels of service with an enormous number of patients that are waiting to be seen.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay.
Excellent. Are there any other questions? In which case, thank you very much.
Well,
thanks for taking us
through it, and I hope that wasn't, but thank you so much.
Not at all.
Appreciate
thank you very much.
Thank you.